Patreon.com/the Walk-Off Podcast. $4 a month gets you in there.
Good morning. We've got Mitch Bannon joining us on the show today, but a couple things to get out of the way before we do that. Let's start with 3 studs and a dud. All right, quite a few studly candidates this week, as the Blue Jays did go 5-1. Obviously, the pitching staff is a great place to look. Alek Manoah with his best performance of the week, going 7 strong, 0 earned runs against the Yankees. However, Jordan Romano blew the save. Couldn't get it done. We fell 3-2 to the Yankees. Went 5-0 in the other games, though. Kikuchi looked great, got 2 wins this week, 11 2/3 innings, 11 strikeouts to only 3 walks, 1 earned run that came on a home run. Otherwise, Barrios looked good. He gave us 7 innings, 9 strikeouts. Chris Bassett did Chris Bassett things, 6 1/3, 2 earned runs, 4 Ks. Did hit a batter, did walk 4 guys. However, Kevin Gausman, your stud number 3 of the week, went 7 strong, 11 strikeouts. Kevin Gausman, rock steady as it ever gets. That's your 3rd stud of the week. Stud number 2, we're going to the offensive side of the ball. Vladimir Guerrero Jr., up to his bad self. 2 home runs, 6 RBIs in 6 games. Strikeouts nice and low, only 2 Ks. Batting average this week, .320. OPS, 1090. That's good enough for 2nd stud of the week. Stud number 1. I try to not penalize guys for a small sample size, right? For the same reason I don't try and inflate. Like last week, Jose Barrios had 2 starts, pitched well in both of them, was not the top stud of the week. This week, Yusei Kikuchi had 2 starts, pitched great in both of them, not good enough to be a stud. So I try to not let sample size be a factor. However, Espinal, 2 games played, just 4 at-bats. He did go 3 for 4, which is good for a .750 batting average, and an OPS of 1550. However, it's just too small of a sample size for me. I can't give him 1st star of the week, especially when this guy was slugging the way he was slugging. Danny Jansen, friend of the show, 3 home runs, 8 RBIs, good for a .375 batting average and an OPS of 1412. The kid went, 6 for 16 at the dish this week. So very good out of Danny Jansen. You'll take that all day long. As for the duds this week, this is a tough one because he holds a special place in my heart. But your dud for week number 4, Gavin Biggio. What's going on with Gavin Biggio? 4 games this week, 13 at-bats, struck out 7 times. He struck out 7 out of his 13 at-bats, 0 walks. He did get 1 hit. Good for an average of .077. That was the lowest on the team. An OPS of .385. That's where his on-base percentage should be. Gavin, what's going on, buddy? Gavin Biggio is playing himself out of a role on this Blue Jays team. I think we're going to get a lot of looks at Gavin Biggio in the next week or 2. He needs to do something. This walk to strikeout rate is concerning to say the least. 7 Ks. This is a guy whose main asset is his ability to draw a walk. On the season now, Gavin Biggio, 3 walks to 18 strikeouts. That's insanity. He's 5th on the team in strikeouts. behind only Springer, Belt, Chapman, and Varsho. Each of those guys has 10 extra games played than Gavin Biggio, with the exception of Belt. But at least when Belt's not striking out, he's putting the ball in play. So I don't know what to tell you. Gavin Biggio, you're the dud this week. It is trouble, my friend. Trouble for you. Okay, that's your 3 studs and a dud for week number 4. Without any further ado, let's get to the Mitch Bannon interview. Cheers. Bye, Dad.
If you're watching this right now and you haven't hit the like button, Billy, get on it. Bug your brother. Tell him to do the same.
We are very excited to have returning to the show Blue Jays reporter and insider for Sports Illustrated, Mitch Bannon. Welcome back to the show, buddy.
Thanks for having me as always, guys. It's always fun to come on.
Yeah, man. We haven't talked to you since the winter. How was your time away from baseball?
Good. Yeah, that feels like forever ago now. It's only been a few weeks, I guess, but
You're in the full swing of it again now.
I know exactly. I felt like that first road trip, I wasn't on it, and so it felt like I wasn't really like into game mode. And then they came back, and we're off and running.
Did you do anything over the winter? Did you go on vacation? What do you do to like clear your head of baseball once you're like drowning in it for 162 games?
A lot of reading. My goal is to read a bunch of books, and then because I know I like never have time to read during the season, so I got to do that. I went to New York for a bit. I traveled around and really kind of unplugged, but it was different than the previous off season because we had the lockout, which was really like a true unplug. Like I know I'm not going to have to be on call, not to go to any press conferences, hop on any Brandon Belt Zoom calls anytime soon. But
yeah,
this season was a little bit different. I still kind of had to be around at all times.
I have a question for you as a book expert. Are you you're paperback or you're reading like on a Kindle or what?
I'm an adamant paperback guy, actually. Me and my friends have this discussion all the time because we try to read like some of the same books, a pseudo book club at some time, and they all are like big Kindle, big e-reader, big like download the digital version. Some of them even like audiobook guys. And I'll go online, I'll buy the book, I'll wait the couple days for it to come. I'll go to kind of used bookstores. I have to. For like a 300 plus page book, I need kind of the physical copy. I don't know why. I just, especially when I want to like kind of make notes on a book or like talk about it with other people, I need that kind of physical copy in my hands.
All right. I could kind of see it in your eyes when you brought it up, but if I read, in quotes here, if I read a book by listening to the author read it to me, does that count as having read a book? I go out over this with my brother all the time. I say, oh yeah, I read this Malcolm Gladwell book. And he's like, no, you didn't. You listened to the audiobook. So solve this for us, Mitch. Does that count?
I'll give it to you. I think so. Right. But I wouldn't do that. I'm personally not going to like claim that, but I'll give it to other people for sure.
All right.
So if you like just having the physical copy in your hand, does that translate to music too? Are you like a records guy?
No, not really. Like I have a couple records, but they're almost more like show for me. Like they're on my wall. I don't have like a record player or anything like that. I'm a Spotify guy when it comes to my music, so not the same.
Well, it's made it so easy. I mean, I was against the algorithm at first, but then it keeps feeding me all this music I love. And I'm like, I don't know why I was against this. I'm really enjoying it. So
exactly.
Let's talk some baseball here before we start getting comments that we're completely off the rails. Obviously,
an off day yesterday. What's not to like?
Yeah, the walk-off book club. Here we are, the walk-off podcast book club. Yeah. So after sweeping away the White Sox and outscoring them 22-2, it's been a while since we've actually watched the Jays demolish a series opponent quite like that. What was your biggest takeaway from this series outside of the fact that Chicago is not a very good team?
It's funny because I was actually, sometimes I do kind of part-time work for MLB.com when like the road reporter doesn't come into town. And this week I was actually on White Sox coverage. So I was having to kind of view the series from their side. And my big takeaway was that team's not great vibes right now. They are not having a good time, not a whole lot of fun, but I think they just got like pitched really well against like all 3 starters the Blue Jays threw at them exploited the White Sox chase problems. Like that's a team that entered the series with the highest chase rate in the league, and it got worse over the course of the 3 games. So I think the Jays had a really good pitching game plan. Obviously, they scored 22 runs across the 3 games, so that helps. But I think they were really good at knowing that this is a team that was going to give them strikes and just attacking them with breaking balls just off the zone. Like you saw that in the Kikuchi start. Those sliders down and into the right-handed batters, it just absolutely ate them alive.
I mean, the starting pitching outside of the first 10 days of the season has been pretty much lights out, man. Like they've put together the longest run of quality starts that we've seen out of this Blue Jays organization in 5 years. All of the dudes seem very confident. I know there were big question marks around Yusei Kikuchi and Jose Barrios starting the season, but they even seem to be coming around. Are you on board with those two? Do you feel a little more confident in Yusei and Jose? And is there one of the two that you feel more confident in?
It's funny. I was actually thinking about that second part of the question this morning. Like, who do I think is like truly going to finish the season with like an ERA that starts with a 3 between those two guys? And like everything pushes me towards Barrios, just the track record, the guy we know he can be. Like, this isn't necessarily him finding something. This is him refinding something he was for 7-8 years. But when I look at like the pitchers, what they're throwing, how effective they've been, like Kikuchi has just been better. And so it's not that Barrios has been bad. He's been usable. He's had a couple of bad starts at the beginning of the year there, but then really seemed to figure something out. But like, if this is the Yusei Kikuchi we get for the rest of the year, he's not a 4th or 5th starter. He's a guy you would want starting a playoff game and can strike out 9 guys in 5 innings.
His K rate this year has been eye-popping.
Yeah. And I think like I feel like I've been saying this for a couple weeks now, but I do think there's going to be bumps in the Yusei Kikuchi road. Like I think there's going to be those bad starts. And I think last year he had a habit of when things started kind of going off the rails, they would really tumble for him. And so we haven't necessarily, aside from that Angel start, seen him have to deal with things going sideways. And when they went sideways in that Angel start, like Varsho dropped that ball in left field, then he let up the home run. So it wasn't a great bounce back there. I want to see him struggle. I want to see him have 2 bad starts in a row and then come back and have a couple good starts in a row. And if he can do that, then I'm fully on board the Yusei Kikuchi train. And even right now, I think that contract's looking like at least something the Jays don't want out of anymore. And if he has a couple more good starts, it could end up being the value I think they thought they were getting.
It's interesting, the Yusei Kikuchi will get blown up and then pitch really well kind of track there, because this isn't just Yusei Kikuchi within this Blue Jays rotation. I know Adam was giving me some stats from last season on Chris Bassett, and the dude is incredible when he's lights out. Like I think, and I'm just going off the top of my head, so obviously I don't know exactly, but I think it was like 6 innings pitched, 0 earned runs, 7 innings pitched, 1 earned run, 6 innings pitched, 0 earned runs, 3 innings pitched, 6 earned runs. And then it was back to, so it's just interesting to see that dichotomy of like extreme success and then a stinker. Can that be a problem if they've got 3 guys doing that? Or would you rather almost just take 3 good starts and a bad one and rely on the offense 25% of the time?
Yeah, I think it's like, that's definitely a fair point. And I think it's right that the Jays do have a lot of guys like that. But I think maybe, especially in kind of 2023 baseball, we underestimate how that might just be a trend across the league. Like, I don't think there's many guys these days who just give you the 6 innings pitched, 3 or 4 earned runs every single time. There's no guy who pitches to like a mid-4s ERA like that anymore. There's very few.
Yeah.
Ross Stripling last year was kind of an enigma in how consistent he was, giving 5+ 2 earned runs every single time. Like, I think it's more that the way teams game plan now, if they figure something out, or if that pitcher's just a little bit off, they're going to torch him that day. I think teams are so good with information that they can exploit like little things, pitch tipping, and put big numbers up against even really good pitchers. But then when they don't have that edge, and when the edge is with the pitchers, guys throw so hard, guys breaking balls are so nasty that they're going to be just really unhittable that day. So I can only talk from a Blue Jays perspective, because like you guys, I watch the Blue Jays more than any other team. But just looking at other teams and trying to like ask around on that, I do think it's more of a league-wide trend than maybe just a Blue Jays thing.
You know what's funny? I never thought of that, and you are so dead on just with how much information there is out there. If you figure out a pitcher for one game, like it, yeah, it's so funny. I never even thought of that. That was a great answer, Mitch. Let's take a right turn here and talk something that I know you have already talked probably ad nauseum for the last year and a half. Lord knows we have, but Bo Bichette's defense. It's been a thorn in the side of Blue Jays fans for years. I'm starting to feel like there's a portion of the fan base that it really doesn't matter what he does. They've already made up their mind that he should be playing second base. But if you look at his defensive runs saved this year, he's actually the best shortstop in the American League. He's sitting at 2 defensive runs saved. Last year, of course, he was at a negative 16 and one of the worst. I predicted Bo Bichette will be an average shortstop league-wide in 2023. Where are you at on Bo Bichette's defense, and where do you see him going forward?
Yeah, I think like average is definitely an attainable goal. I think you look at his skill set. He has the arm power. He has the feet. He's a really athletic guy. Like he can definitely be an average shortstop. I think the issues we've seen with him, especially last year, were kind of overthinking things. And when things don't necessarily go right, you see him double clutch. You see him kind of botching balls on the ground that he would normally have. And so I think it is like that part of his game is very mental for him. And so I think a good start could go a long way for him having a really good season. I know last year he really tinkered with his arm slot, and then he found something when he was throwing on the run that he liked this sidearm and was working really well. And then that kind of bled into all of his throws, and he was doing it when he wasn't running. And that's how we saw those easy throws that were hooking down the line. So I think he's a guy that like he's really working at the defensive aspect of his game. And I think that hurts him at times. Like he's working arguably too hard on it. I think if he can just be what you said, +2 defensive runs saved, that's really solid at a cornerstone position like shortstop. I think they'll take it. So hopefully he takes this early start, kind of is not complacent, but is okay with what he's doing, and then doesn't feel like maybe kind of tweak stuff or overthink stuff in the field. And yeah, I think average is super attainable because of the athleticism, and it's something I think the Jays will take given the bat he has for sure.
If he continues to do what he's doing with the bat and can achieve that average defensive shortstop status, that makes him a possible MVP, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. Especially
because really defense is the only thing that's really holding him back.
Yeah, exactly. And like defense, like he's not going to rack up the defensive WAR, which would hurt him for a lot of voters. I think like shortstop, if you can really get like 3 or 4 wins worth of defense if you're one of the good guys, and so he may fall behind there. But yeah, he looks like the same guy he was at the end of the year last year. Can hit 300. He's going to walk a tiny bit, but it's going to be enough, and he's going to hit for power when people make mistakes in the middle of the plate. MVP candidate probably. There's still like 8 or 9 guys
obviously
above him, but like I would be more shocked if he's healthy and doesn't get MVP votes this year than the other way around.
Yeah, he has been just lights out since September last year. I mean, it's not like he even had a bad season last year up to September. It was just slightly above average instead of like out of this world. But where do you see Bo Bichette settling in? Do you think he's a 315 hitter, 30 home run guy? Where do you see his offensive output by the end of the season? I know. Look into your crystal ball, Mitch.
Yeah, like that's doable. I think hitting above 300 is really hard to do on a consistent basis this year, especially when I think he was a guy who they didn't really shift last year. So you can't kind of expect the shift has gone away bump. So it's not like some guys like Corey Seager. I think he'll hit 40 points higher this year than he did last year. Bo's probably going to hit for the same average he did last year, just above 300, around 300. And then I think like the power numbers, like if he's locked in, he doesn't miss those like hung breaking balls. And so 30, 35, new ballpark. I think that opposite field alley, they brought in just a bit. And that's like, he loves those kind of opposite field, weight back, slider in the middle of the zone. Boom, that's gone to right field. So 40 home runs might be a little much. He's not like the biggest guy in the world, but I think he could definitely hit 30 and hit 300 for the next 3 or 4 years.
Sure hope so. So probably the most unlucky and most hyped dude in the Toronto Blue Jays organization finally got a call up. Nate Pearson joining this bullpen. Mitch, are you a Nate Pearson believer?
Yeah. I think the question with him is like, what is the ultimate role? Like, we know he's a reliever now. We don't have to play around with the will he start? Will he be the 3-4 inning bulk guy? He's a one, maybe 4 outs, 5 outs, 1 inning reliever. Like, that is who he is. And in the minors this year, he looked fantastic. He was striking out like 50% of batters. He got up to like 102 at one point, I think. I think the thing with him is the velocity consistency. Like, every guy comes in and out, and one day he'll be throwing, let's say 96, and next day he'll be 98. Some days it's 94. It'll fluctuate. But I think for Nate, when he's really, really on, it's 100, and it's 100, it's 101, and it's really hard to throw that hard. So it makes sense why it fluctuates. But even a couple of days ago, he was kind of sitting more 98, and he was still effective. He still pitched a clean inning. But if the Jays want him to be that kind of 8th inning guy, a true dominant reliever, he'll need to find a little consistency in the velocity for it to play every day and for them to keep handing him high leverage situations.
I mean, the bullpen is probably the one area with this team that could be improved. When you look at the current roster of guys in this pen, and we'll include Nate Pearson in this, do you think it has the ability to be an elite bullpen without any outside help?
I think so. I think I'm higher on the bullpen than a lot of people. Like, I really like Jimmy Garcia. I know he hasn't had the greatest start to the year. I think like he's throwing harder than ever. He looks like the stuff looks really good to me. So I'm kind of banking on his numbers kind of finding their form as the year goes on. Adam Simber has had a couple tough outings to start the year, but this shoulder thing that he's currently on the IL with, that dates back to spring training. Like, he was pitching on backfields trying to work through that. And I think he's been pitching through it all year. So I'm willing to kind of just throw out all of the outings up until this point and assume he's going to come back and be the same guy he has since he got to Toronto. Anthony Bass is a guy who, like, the peripheral numbers are pretty scary right now. I'm interested to see how that goes. But basically everybody else, and that includes Trevor Richards in the pen, I've liked what I've seen. I'm really confident in being able to get like good major league hitters out. Like Jordan Romano, his numbers are amazing to start the year as per usual. Like, he's throwing just as hard as ever. The slider looks better than ever. Like, he's one of the best 8, 9, 10 relievers in all of baseball. And that's what playoff teams have at the back. And I do kind of like the other guys beyond him. So I do think I'm higher on the bullpen than most. And I think this unit, maybe like every bullpen can use a David Bednar at the deadline. I don't think the Pirates are going to be selling anymore, so maybe he won't be available, but I'm team bullpen, I think.
So you touched on Anthony Bass because this is a tough spot in the bullpen. I mean, you mentioned the numbers are not necessarily good. What does he need to do to save his job, like to get himself off the hot seat? He's in the final year of his contract. It's just a $3 million price tag.
35 years old.
To DFA him. I mean, we watched the Blue Jays DFA $12 million with Tanner Roark not too long ago, right? So it's not like it's an unprecedented move for the Jays to go, you know what? You don't have it anymore. Thanks, but see ya. How does this get turned?
Yeah, I think before they would cut ties, we'd get a sore neck IL stint to try to figure stuff out. So if we see one of those coming down the pipe in the next month, that might be really start raising alarm bells that they want to start changing stuff and seeing if they can get him back on track. But I think the big thing for him is to re-find his ability to just dominate right-handed hitters. Like, last year, he had that fastball slider that righties hit like 100 against. They couldn't touch him for the entire season. And I think he put a lot of work in the offseason and in spring training to finding weapons to help him get lefties out as well. Like, he was working on a splitter a little bit that would move away from the lefties. And so he could maybe round out his game. And I don't know if it's come at the cost of the right-handed hitters, but in the last month or two, he's lost that dominance against righties. The slider hasn't been nearly as good. He's getting hit really hard. And so if you're not doing what you do well, you're not going to be a very good reliever. So I think he's got to refine that. He's got to refine the slider and maybe worry a little less about trying to build yourself up as someone who can pitch against lefties. Go back to what you were last year. Look in that time capsule, figure out what you were doing then, and then refine that form. I think it'll be good.
And then
That deadline move. Oh, sorry, Adam, go ahead.
I was just going to say, then speaking of rehab stints, you tweeted out yesterday about Mitch White made his first rehab start in single A. They're obviously not going to rush that, because the more they rush it, the more quickly they have to make
They need to make decisions. Yeah.
What kind of a timeline should we expect with Mitch White? Like, is he weeks away, days away?
Like, if there was an injury in the rotation next week, like I could see them pushing him up to AAA. You get a Casey Lawrence spot start, and then Mitch White's in the rotation the next turn. Like, he pitched 3.1 innings, so he's not built up quite yet. And so I think they're kind of pushing him through a spring training buildup right now, like a traditional spring training buildup. But I do think you're right. Like, there's no reason to rush him. If they rush him, then they have to make a decision. He doesn't have options. And the only guy in the option or in the pen right now with options are Nate Pearson and Zach Pop. And if Pearson keeps pitching well, Zach Pop's pitched really well. So then you're going to lose someone who is really helping you right now just to get Mitch White on the roster. So timeline wise, I think it's as long as nobody gets hurt, he's going to take his entire potential rehab, which I believe for pitchers is 40 days. It might be 30 days. I'm not 100% on that. So if he just started that, I don't know if pitching bullpens like at the complex counts for your rehab time. I'd have to nail down some exact days. It's a good thing for me to dig on. I thank you for that. But I do expect him to take as much time as they possibly can before they're forced to make a move, because they're going to need Mitch White. Like, they're going to need a sixth starter. Zach Thompson has not looked very good in AAA to start the year. Casey Lawrence has like a 1 ERA, so he's probably the sixth starter right now. But we saw that in the big leagues last year. He's not a guy you want consistently giving you innings. So I think they like Mitch White as that sixth starter. They're not going to run him out of the rehab and then DFA him. So I think they're going to really take their time with him, as much time as they can.
This trade deadline move that they made, acquiring Bass and Pop last year for Jordan Groshans, I wasn't 100% sure what to think of it last year. It's not like I was all upset about it. Anthony Bass was a great addition. They needed somebody who could put up some Ks at the back end of that rotation, or bullpen, I should say, and that's exactly what he provided. He was excellent for the Jays right up until pretty much the inning he blew up in game 2 of the wild card. But everyone got blown up, so it's hard to even shit talk him at all, right? But now this season, you look at it and you're like, you know what? Zach Pop is a really nice little piece that actually might wind up being the piece they were truly after all along. And as he continues to put up some really nice numbers outside of the Zach Pop implosion, it sounds like a band's name there, but outside of Zach Pop's one little blemish, he's been great. What are your thoughts on Zach Pop? Do you think he has the ability to be a high leverage guy maybe down the road?
Yeah, for sure. Down the road, I think he could be a high leverage guy like in 2 weeks.
Love it.
Like, I think you look around baseball at the other really, really good relievers. A guy on the Twins like Joe Duran comes to mind. And what does he throw? He throws a high velocity sinker and a slider. And that's exactly what Zach Pop has. Like, he's very much built in the mold of some of the best arms in baseball. He throws just as hard. He can get into the upper 90s. The big thing was he was like a ground ball guy before he got to Toronto. And that makes sense. A lot of left-handed bats can get across to that sinker, especially if you're just putting it to the outside corner every single time. Guys know what you're doing. They can at the very least get on top of it, put it in play, or foul it off. And this year, the big difference for him is he's been throwing it to both sides of the plate, and the slider's become more of a swing and miss weapon. So it's made his entire arsenal play up. People are missing everything. He's getting way more swing and miss. And that's 97 miles an hour with a heavy sinker that moves a lot and a lot of swing and miss. Like, that's a closer mold. So I think consistency is going to be a big thing. He did not look good in that Houston start. He hasn't really been able to throw in back-to-back days yet. And so that'll be something maybe he can build towards throughout the season. But the stuff in the arsenal has looked really good this year, and it's like an 8th inning arsenal for sure.
Just a little more development to go.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's natural. Like he's been a bullpen guy since he got drafted by the Dodgers. And so it's not like he hasn't had time to work on this. Who knows if the ability to pitch on back-to-back days will ever come. For when you
Yeah.
throw hard with that much movement, it does a lot of wear and tear to the arm. So it might just not be an option, but it's something to see this year to really see kind of what his ceiling is.
So Brandon Belt had an ugly start to the season, obviously coming off of knee surgery and he just turned 35, so he's got a little age to him, a seasoned veteran, if you will, but he has looked really good. Brandon Belt has a 162 weighted runs created plus since April 11th. His K rate is still pretty high at 27%, but he also had 27% K rate in 2021 when he had that big resurgence of a year. So he's kind of a strikeout guy anyways. I would absolutely love to see Brandon continue to do what he's doing and kind of see him moved up the batting order to maybe that 4 or 5 spot so they can push Varsho down to maybe, 6 or 7 type of thing and just give Varsho a little breathing room, not put so much pressure on him. What kind of impact can you see a healthy, productive Brandon Belt adding to this lineup?
Oh, I think a lot. Like, I think the key about him is all the talk in the offseason was how much they thought that last year, like they weren't necessarily, the front office wasn't necessarily worried about like right-handed bats versus left-handed bats. What I think they realized looking back on the season, talking to other people, looking at the numbers was teams and especially opposing pitchers could really get in a groove against them. And you could just start throwing like sinkers and sliders to the righties. And you would just, once you got the feel for those pitches, you would just start mowing down Jays. And I think like the soft tossing lefty that some seem to always get the Jays, whereas like change ups away and like sinkers in on the righties. So it was, or away from the righties, sorry. I think it's like they realized that they needed like a completely different look. Kiermaier brings a different look, like the high contact lefty, and brings an even different look. Like he's a guy who's going to lead this team in pitches per plate appearance. He's not going to swing at a whole lot of pitches unless it's right in the middle of the zone. He's going to make a guy work. And he's just got a very different swing. Like I'm sure everyone's noticed, it's like that hitchy swing. It seems like he's like trying to yank every ball. It looks awkward, but it's very unlike every other Jay swing. So at the very least, he forces opposing pitchers to change their game plans in the middle of going through the batting order. And if he's effective, if he gets a 160 WRC plus and is hitting 25 home runs, then they're really going to have to change the game plan and focus it around him. So I think we'll see how good he is. Well, I expect him to be maybe a little closer to a league average hitter over the course of the season, but I think the key value there is he's a very different look from everybody else in the lineup.
This is great.
That's a really good point.
Sorry, I just want to jump in here. So this is great. We have every kind of left-handed hitter then. We have the high contact Kiermaier. We have the power upside of Belt. We have Kevin Biggio, who can draw a walk. And then we have Dalton Varsho, who's good defensively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they very clearly, like, I think there's like, they like that right-handed bat that they have. A lot of their prospects are the same, kind of like the good eye. And maybe we can find something with the power, like the Jordan Groshans, Austin Martin, like they very clearly have a type that they've tried to develop in the minors. And I think it's kind of a hat tip to the organization that they realized, okay, maybe we're really good at developing this type of guy, but when it gets to the major league level, we need a little diversity. And I think it's playing well so far this year.
So big news out of Pittsburgh a couple days ago. Brian Reynolds signed an incredibly team-friendly contract, 8 years, $107 million. Or at least in my opinion, it was a very team-friendly contract. I guess we'll see how it plays out. Of course, as a Jays fan, and I know I should, honestly, Mitch, I know I should just be happy for Pirates fans. I know I should be, but I feel a little jilted because I look at our core players and what it would take to lock them up, and it is probably triple the downfall of bloodlines, right? These guys, sons of MLBers, they know how the industry works and they know where their value is and they're going to get their value. We have heard a little bit more talk out of both the front office and Vladdy that they would like to come to terms at some point. I mean, obviously this is just lip service, but I think there's something there. Can you see Vladdy getting signed in the next 12 months? And how much more are they going to need to dish out than the Pirates or Brian Reynolds?
The one thing I will say is don't expect an extension in the season. I just
No.
think this front office does not like negotiating big deals in season. We haven't really seen them extend anybody during a season. And like a lot of that comes in the offseason. So if it happens in the next 12 months, I think it would come in the winter. They just don't like even last year in COVID, they settled all of their arbitration cases before the season started because they didn't want the distraction of arbitration during the first couple of weeks of the season. Like this front office was very conscious of not putting like extra things on players' plates, like contract extensions during the year. So I would probably start really honing in on the Vlad and Bo watch, more so the Vlad watch now that Bo has that kind of weird bridge deal in the offseason. I could see it happening. Like it's the issue is I could have seen it happening last offseason. I could have seen it happening the offseason before, and just like not a lot has changed. Like Vlad continues to be really good. His core continues to win a lot of games, but there hasn't been any like real big push from either side to sit down and be like, let's get this done. And you do lose leverage when you do that. So I get why neither side is saying that. And so the closer we get to free agency, if anything, I think the less and less that a big extension comes to fruition. So it could still happen. I do think like if you were to give me a 50-50, that's me leave or go.
Obviously you don't know, but if it's not this off season, would you, as just a bet, you're placing a bet, it's your money, Mitch, 1 year out, are you putting your money on Vladdy going to free agency, or are you putting it on a deal getting done?
I would put it on him going to free agency, I think, but it's real close. We're talking like 45-55. I just think he's going to get paid so much money, and like it's not like the Jays don't have the money to give. It's just like I don't know. I'm just going with my gut, and I'm going to say I think he would go to free agency. He could still come back, but
I agree with you. No, I agree with you, man. I really kind of feel like the best chance to sign him is going to be this upcoming off season. 2 years out, we'll see where he's at, where the Jays are financially, and what they want to do with their money. I feel very strongly like you do. I'm even a lot more 75% free agency, 25 they get it signed if it winds up going to that last year, like, because he's so close, like 1 year away from free agency. The only solace that I have is that thank God he's not going to the Yankees.
Yeah, that's not going to happen, which is good. And I think like a big thing will be Juan Soto could sign a big extension this year. And like, he's a similar kind of offensive profile, obviously a little bit better of a player than Vlad, probably on paper. So I think it'll be interesting to see if he signs where that number comes in, and if it maybe helps the deal come to fruition.
So Eric Swanson, acquired from the Mariners for Teoscar Hernandez, obviously. And he's already been showing that he truly is an impact arm in that bullpen. In your opinion, he's probably the highest leverage arm outside of Romano, eh?
Yeah, probably. I think that's
I know you're a Jimmy guy, but just on the circle of trust, I feel like Schneider probably leans to him as their number 2, eh?
Yeah, I think that's safe. We've seen him get a lot of those like secondary save opportunities, like, oh, we're up by 4.
Yeah,
we'll let Swanson get these. He's kind of been the closer too, for sure.
You look at the strikeout rates of this bullpen, and they have 5 guys currently above the league average for bullpen strikeout rate. How big is that for John Schneider? That was kind of an Achilles heel of the team last year, but now they do have guys who can go out in that high leverage situation and get a K. How important is that to a team?
Oh, it's super important. You don't have to play defense if you strike guys out. So it really just takes a whole third of the game out of the equation if you're striking guys out. And so I just think it's nothing bad can happen with the strikeout is the easiest way. Like that. Like you can't drop a fly ball. You can't mess up a throw. There's a lot bad things can happen when balls get put in play. So it's just the safest and easiest thing. So that's why strikeout relievers are so relied upon. They're the easiest and safest option, and they make a manager's life really, really easy. And so a thing with Swanson I think is important is he's been really good against both lefties and righties. Like that splitter plays so well against lefties, and for a bullpen that just has Tim Mesa thrown from the left side, having kind of that second weapon against lefties. Trevor Richards is in the mix there too, allows them to kind of attack a bunch of different types of pitchers. or hitters. Sorry.
So speaking of Eric Swanson, Teoscar Hernandez returns to the Rogers Center with the Mariners, I should say. What do you think his reception is going to be? It should be pretty warm, is my guess.
I would hope so. Like, he was
Yeah, right?
a good soldier for the Blue Jays. He played really good baseball. He's like a development success story. They traded for not a whole lot for him. He struggled at the big league level. He got sent down. He really figured stuff out in the minors, came back, made all-star teams, won Silver Sluggers. He is a good story, and he's really close with obviously Vlad and a lot of other guys on this team. So I think like you see Vlad kind of joking with like Yandy Diaz, who he's clearly friends with on the Rays. I imagine there's going to be some good shenanigans in the field if Teoscar gets on base and it's Vlad at first and Teoscar standing on first base. I think it'll be fun, but there's also, this is kind of like a revenge series, so it'll be interesting to see how the rest of the team kind of takes it.
Will he get a warm reception from the Blue Jays fans in Toronto there? Like standing ovation, so. Curtain call,
I would be really shocked if it was anything but a good. I bet he'll get a video tribute. I bet there'll be a good clap for him on Friday.
I expect him to come out for a curtain call in the fourth after he hits the home run so that the Jays can come back. Do the reverse on him. Obviously, everyone's eyes on the mound as Luis Castillo and Alek Manoah go head-to-head, right? A rematch of game one of the wild card. What do you expect to see out of Manoah in this start? Do you think he can repeat this good outing and the positive vibes he had in New York?
I think it's an underratedly really big start for Manoah. Like he didn't look phenomenal in those first couple starts. Even the good one against Kansas City, the control was certainly not there. So it's big, obviously, for his season. Can he kind of build off that Yankee Stadium start? Can he once again look like the more 2022 Alek Manoah? But I'm sure there's some demons facing this Mariners lineup for him as well. Like that first inning, he hit Julio Rodriguez with 2 strikes, and that inning really kind of fell apart for him. So it's a challenge both from building off of his last start and also facing a lineup that got him last time he faced him. So it's 2 challenges mixed into one, and therefore will be a big day for Manoah for sure.
You mentioned this big game, Demons with Seattle. His last 3 big games: the playoff series, stinker; the season opener, stinker; the home opener in Toronto this year, stinker. If he goes out and throws another stinker in this game against the Mariners, what kind of long-term narrative starts to develop around Alek Manoah? Is he a big game guy?
I think
it's still too early in his career, and we're just overreacting.
And looked at those, but I think then I've thought about those exact same 3 starts, and I've said and written that exact same thing about kind of a guy you would think would be a big game starter has not lived up to the expectations in 3 of his biggest games. But you look back to his major league debut, like that's probably the biggest game of this guy's life, and he absolutely shoved against the Yankees. You look at last week in Yankee Stadium, he has 4 really bad starts. His season really seems like it's spiraling. He bounces back and absolutely shoves. So I think it's kind of picking and choosing around to maybe the big games to say he's not a big game starter.
He did pitch well in the All-Star game.
Yeah, true. He got a good big inning starter. He was good in that one. So I'm not necessarily worried about that narrative. I do think he is a guy that can get a little fired up. I think he'll be the first one to tell you that he gets pretty fired up on the mound, and that works for him a lot of the time. He's super competitive. He reaches back for that little bit more. And I think he's got a good mound presence. So it definitely works for him. We've seen it work against him at times. I think that 0-2 pitch to Rodriguez, not to dredge up the bad memories, but that 0-2 pitch in the wild card game is the perfect example. He was trying to do too much. He was trying to run that sinker in a little too much. And so instead of starting his game off with a strikeout, he starts it off with Julio Rodriguez standing on first base after hit by pitch. So I think he's got to kind of find not necessarily a middle ground, but he's just got to learn to use his energy always as a positive and not let it get away from him sometimes.
So the Mariners had some really bad news come their way in the last couple of days. Robbie Ray is going to have season-ending surgery, which is a real hit to this rotation. Is this still a team that will compete for a playoff spot, in your opinion?
I think they're in a lucky spot where they tried to trade Chris Flexen all offseason. He was in trade talks all offseason, and they just couldn't find a deal. And now Chris Flexen's going to be a really big piece for them because he's going to be in the rotation probably for the rest of the year. They're lucky in that respect. And like Robbie Ray would have definitely taken them to the next level, could have been a big playoff starter for them. But they look like a playoff team to me. Jared Kalenick's having a really, really good year. Teoscar's
Isn't he?
Field. Like, I think they're definitely a playoff team. I think they're a very similar team to the team they were last year. I would expect them to be right there in the wild card race. And so I don't think it'll hurt them too much. It'll hurt for sure, but I would still expect them to be there at the end of the year.
I do like the acknowledgement of Kalenick's good season because he has been my example. I've probably kicked the horse too many times of being a can't miss prospect who missed after
Yeah,
clunker
you just gotta have
all season
patience
last year.
sometimes.
Yeah,
Sometimes they figure it out.
We always have listener questions for you, Mitch, so we're going to get to those in a second here. We really appreciate your time. I do wish to just end on your opinion on Zach Gallen. The guy, I mean, and it's looking like he might be literally quietly a top 5 starter in all of baseball. He's gone 28 innings pitched without a run. Last season, he went 44 and a third innings pitched without a run. I know Jays fans and a lot of American League fans just don't see him enough, which is one of the cool things about the balanced schedule that's coming out, is we will get to see guys like Gallen. Is Gallen on your radar? How good is Zach Gallen?
He's kind of been on my radar from like more of a fantasy baseball perspective for the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've seen him kind of break out. He's been on my radar. And then last night, I don't know, I'm sure you guys saw that like weird change up cutter pitch. Like he's a pitching ninja guy for me. You see him pop up on those. I don't know if I've ever
all the time
sat down and watched a full start of his though. I think I agree that's like a big positive of this new schedule is I'm just going to see a bunch of players and a bunch of teams that I wouldn't otherwise have gotten to. And the Diamondbacks, especially with kind of the Lourdes and Moreno connection this year, our team is definitely looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, me too, man. And I'm it's funny because with me, I'm the same way with Gallen. I just haven't sat down. I've seen him a couple times for a game, but I haven't sat down since he's really kind of taken that next step and watched a full game. It's all, I mean, we were lucky enough to have Rob Friedman, Pitching Ninja, on the show a couple weeks ago, and like just the amount of content he puts out where it's Gallen this and Gallen that, like he really is a special pitcher, and I am excited to see more of him.
Yeah, same.
All right, Adam, all you, buddy. Let's get to some listener questions.
All right, we got a couple to get to. First one comes from Braden. Says, so for the past few years, White Sox have been a pretty good comparable for the Blue Jays with young stars and potential. Now, Blue Jays fans aren't necessarily satisfied with where we're at either, but should we look at what's happening with the White Sox as proof that things more or less have gone pretty darn well here in Toronto? And then also adds, P.S., after watching the outfielders misbehaving this week, it's clear the White Sox aren't having fun right now. You know what they need? A home run jacket.
Everyone needs a home run jacket. Now the Pirates, it's fixed it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
The
so
Jays
original.
Be, asking for it back if it's given that kind of bump to Pittsburgh. But I think like the White Sox are an example of that. The Royals and the Tigers, like the Royals and Tigers started a rebuild at the exact same time as the Blue Jays. And the Royals and Tigers are essentially, they fired their GMs and they're starting to rebuild all over again. Like I think it's completely reasonable to be unsatisfied with how the last 2 Blue Jays seasons have ended. This team is super talented. The core is super talented. And this is a team and a fan base that can rightfully want this team to compete for a World Series. But at the same time, it's important to note that it could be going a lot worse than it is for the Blue Jays. And they're pretty lucky that Bo and Vlad have turned into the players they have. And they've spent on this pitching staff. And for like Kevin Gausman has come in and been an amazing starter. So a lot has gone right. They've had some pretty tough endings the last 2 years, but there are some fan bases that are hurting a lot more than Toronto, and they started the rebuild at the same time.
Okay, next one comes from Jenna. Says, barring injuries, what does this season's starting rotation look like in August? And specifically, how is Ryu going to be used?
Yeah, I think like if everyone's pitching like they are now, I don't know how Ryu gets starts. I think the one positive is that no team goes through an entire season with 5 starting pitchers. And I think Ryu is going to come back in the perfect time to take over from somebody having to miss a couple of weeks. You can't really predict injuries, but if he can slowly build himself up and you get a little bit extra time to rehab after your 60-day IL stint. And so he can really get back into it. 3, 4 starts in Buffalo in the middle of the summer to really kind of find his form and just be ready when the team needs him. The past couple of years, we've seen that post-trade deadline, they've had to go to Trevor Richards starts and bullpen days for the last 2 years. And those starts, like Thomas Hatch days and a couple Casey Lawrence starts, those ultimately have not gone very well. And they've cost the Jays the few wins that maybe they needed to compete for the division. And so if instead you have Hyun-Jin Ryu coming up and Chad Green coming up and going to the bullpen, it's kind of a built-in layer of security that you already have. You don't have to go out and get that at the deadline. You can probably rely on these guys for those 3 or 4 starts instead. And so I don't know how he cracks if everyone's healthy. We'll see what they do then. But I think it's more important that he's kind of the next layer of security.
Buddy, once every week or two, I'm like, oh yeah, we got Chad Green.
And he's like, if he's back and healthy,
he's great.
Our most talented reliever on this team. Like I wouldn't be shocked if he's like coming in the 8th inning of a 1-run game in the playoffs. It's like he's a really good, really seasoned veteran reliever.
Okay. Last one to get here too then. Michael asks, are the Yankees actually even any good this year? They're 14. A lot of info to back it up here from Michael. Says they're 14-11, but they're bottom 10 in MLB runs scored. Their starting pitchers are decimated, and other than Toronto and I guess the Orioles, they haven't really played any good teams. Giants, Phillies, Guardians, Angels, and Twins. And the Twins are only good because they play the AL Central. Thoughts on that?
I came into the year in one of my kind of bold predictions. I don't know if it's that bold because I think a lot of other people had the same one, that the Jays were going to win the AL East. And I think a big reason I predicted that is because the Yankees were one of the healthiest teams in the league last year, despite being the oldest team in baseball. And age doesn't necessarily make you more injury prone, but there's a pretty good correlation there. And so I think it was pretty rare how healthy they were last year. And we've already seen it kind of bite them early this year. I do think they're a really good team, and I think they're going to be a problem when they start to get some of these guys back. Like Carlos Rodon could be really good. He could very well be the best pitcher in the American League East. And Harrison Bader will definitely deepen that lineup and give them a good defensive center fielder. Stanton's going to miss a while. He's a big bat for them. Like the offense has not looked good. I think they're relying on Josh Donaldson to maybe give them something when he comes back too. We'll see if that happens, but I think it's kind of impressive that they've managed to be 14-11 despite all the injuries. So they may not look like a good team right now, but I think that's a sign that if they do get these guys back and they do have 2 or 3 months in the middle of the season when they're healthy, they're going to be right there. I expect, like the way the AL East is shaping up right now, that's those last 2 weeks of the season with the Rays, the Yankees, and the Jays all kind of playing each other. It's going to be a September dogfight, I think, and I expect all 3 teams to be in it.
Mitch, do you think that 38-year-old Josh Donaldson has anything left in the tank?
Probably not. Like, if I'm being honest, probably not.
Yeah.
Like, we've seen, like, he was so good when he was here, and his swing is so sound, and I think he puts a lot of his work into his swing, but every player, every human being gets to a point in their life where they just don't have the body to do what they once could. And I think that's kind of caught up to Donaldson.
Mitch, we always appreciate your time so much, man. It's really good to have you back on the show and catch up, and all the best. And hopefully we can twist your arm and have you back again later in the season.
No twisting needed, guys. It's always fun. Thanks for having me on.
Right on.
Cheers, Mitch.
Cheers.
Take care.